quick survey here. How many of you are currently actively researching your family's history? That's good, since it's a genealogy group that you are here. How many of you have spent any time researching in the genealogy collection up at the Wichita Public Library? Well, it's not that far away. You can come up there. You're welcome to all attend and come up there. And so tonight we're going to be talking about what kind of resources we have up there and why you may want to come up there to actually do research. And for those of you who have been up there, this is what it looks like. You can see we have research tables. We have lots of books. We have a copier, scanner, and all like that. And this is a view of the room from the other direction. And you can see we have map cases and all sorts of books. In the far left corner, you see a wall with no windows. That's where our vault is. That's where we store all of our rare things that we don't want the sunlight to get on. And we have like the original plat maps for Sedgwick County going from 1870 to the 1920s, and they're handwritten in pencil. And we're hoping to get those digitized in the next year or so. We also have lots of other really good, interesting things back in the vault, one-of-a-kind items that we don't want anybody to walk off with. Then right next to that is the big glassed-in area back there. That's our storage area. And you can see we have compact shelving. And that's where the public doesn't go. You don't want to have to worry about getting crushed in the shelves, that only the staff goes back there. But if you see anything that says storage, that's where it's going to be kept. That's the storage area. And so if you see that on the catalog, just ask us, we'll go back and get it. And then all in front of there are all the books that we have. And we have around 46,000 genealogy books and 20,000 books on Kansas and the Great Plains. So we have quite a few books. You can use hours and days of doing research up there. Our genealogy collection is really good for coverage for New England and the Mid-Atlantic states. The prior person that was here was really big into gathering colonial era records and books that transcribed or indexed those items. And so we have really good coverage for Massachusetts, New York, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. And I was always telling people we have around 1,000 volumes for each one of those states, and so I actually looked it up to see what we have. And Sherry mentioned, I just got done taking a week-long class on Virginia records prior to 1850. And I noticed whenever she was mentioning the different books that they recommend that you use, we had a lot of those at the library. And I found out we had over 1,600 books just on Virginia genealogy. We also have good coverage in the Midwestern states. We have over 4,000 volumes just on those states. For example, we have really good collection for Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and Missouri. That's where I'm from, so yes, I've been buying things for that state. That kind of is the benefit of being in control of a department. You get to buy things you want to buy, right? We also have a pretty good collection for genealogy for Kansas. We have over 3,000 volumes for the state of Kansas. We have volumes for every county. Now, I will admit some of those western counties close to Colorado, we only have maybe a handful. And I know until recently we had 0 on Trigo County. That's where Waukene is. And so when we finally got something donated, I was like, woohoo, we finally got something on every county. I was actually getting so desperate, I was thinking, I got to write my own book so I can have something from Trigo County. And the way we have everything arranged up there is the Dewey Decimal System. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the Dewey Decimal System. It's the most common way of organizing books in a public library. And it's used a lot of places. So if you have the number that you use in our library, you can go to most other public libraries and they use the exact same numbering system. So it kind of correlates from one to the other. And they basically divide it into 2 different topics. You have that, you get range by topic, or you can have range by geographic location. And so the common research topics that genealogists are going to use are going to be how-tos. That's the 929.1s. And so if you're in a small library that only has a shelf of 2 or genealogy, that's the number they're usually going to use. So they're going to stick all their genealogy books, whether they're from Massachusetts or Virginia, they may stick it under that one Dewey number because that's all they have. But that's really also where the how-to books are supposed to go. So it's like how to research in a cemetery, how to research in a county courthouse, how to find your census records and information like that. So that's where you're going to find the how-to information. We also have lots of church histories. That's under the 280s. So like 282, 283, and so on. And so we have really good coverage for that. Census indexes, most people don't use the print indexes anymore, but in case you do, we still have those up there. And we have several hundred and close to 1,000 different census indexes, and I'll talk about those. surnames. And so that's your family history, and that would be under 929.4. No, sorry, not family history. Those are your surnames if you want to research your family history name. So if you're going to research what Enke means or what Smith means or whatever, they will tell you more about your surnames. Yearbooks. Most people don't think about using yearbooks for genealogy. That actually is a good resource for 20th century research, because if you need to have a photo of a parent or of a newly found biological parent, you can actually find photographs in those yearbooks. And that's what they're commonly used for. When people coming in saying we have a DNA match, we think it's a guy in this class, and they'll go through the class rosters and things like that. And so 373 is for high school and 378 is for college. We found out that our catalogers were not always keeping those separate, so we're going through and we're subdividing the high school and the college right now. So if you see some gaps in there, it's because they're downstairs getting recatalogued. Cookbooks. We have around 450 cookbooks, and those are locally created cookbooks, such as like a church or a hospital organization or a women's ladies group, creating their own cookbook. Biographies, that's the 920s. And so if you want a who's who or a biographical index or anything like that, that's where you're going to find them, is the 920s. And atlases. We have lots of atlases, especially historic ones. And so you can take a look and see what the land looked like back then. So that's the common numbers that as a genealogist you're going to be looking at. And so here's a picture of some of our yearbooks. It's a close-up because we have shelves and shelves and shelves of yearbooks. Before I started there in 2002, they did not gather yearbooks. So it's only ones that have been donated to us since then. So we do have pretty good coverage for Wichita. We also have some other towns outside of Wichita. And so we do gather those, and we'll keep on gathering them until we run out of room, which is, in the future. And so therefore, if you want a picture of your person, this may be the only resource you have. The family histories, we have almost 3,900 family histories there. And so that's quite a few. And the call number is 929.2, and that's where you're going to find them there on the shelf. And they're arranged by the first surname that you have on the book. So the first one that you have listed on the book in the title is going to be the one that is filed under. So you can have 4 or 5 different names in that title, but it's only going to be filed under one spot. And then I always tell people, I've always told them whenever I give them a tour, to always look in the library catalog under subject heading and whatever family, like Miller family, Maupin family, Smith family. Look under that subject heading because we may have a book that's on them in the library catalog. So I was telling this to people for years, and finally someone said, well, can you show us how to do that? So I just pulled it up and I put in the subject heading Maupin family, and up pops a book that was on my family. It had 70 pages in there on my immigrant Maupin ancestor that came over in 1699. I was like, wow, I need to follow my own instructions. So here's the title of that book. You can see why I didn't find it, because it's called The History and Genealogies of the Families of Miller, Woods, Harris, Wallace, Maupin, Oldham, Kavanaugh, Brown, with interspersions of notes of the families of Dabney, Reed, Martin, Brodius, Gentry, Jarman, Jameson, and so on. So you can see all those different families are covered in this one book, but we can only file it in one spot. So we picked the first one. And so what would the call number be? Does anybody give a suggestion on what the call number would be for this? Correct. It is 929.2 Miller. So it's family history and then the name of Miller. So all those other ones, if you didn't go to the library catalog and stick in whatever that name was, Dabney, Maupin, whatever, and family, you wouldn't know that we had a book here on that family. And on Maupin's it had 70 pages. That's a huge amount. And here's an example of what was some of the family histories we have on our shelf. And you can see how that it's 929.2 and then the name of the family. And some of them have the old cutter number, which is like maybe C, then the 4 or 5 digits. We're trying to get those all changed over to the actual surname so you can actually know what it means. And so the Dewey Decimal System, besides being the topics, you also have geographic locations. And that's what we're going to talk about right here. So each region has its own Dewey number. Each number means a specific region. Each state has its own number, which is a subset of that region. And then each county has its own number within a subset of that state. So it's like the decimal system. You keep going down until it's smaller and smaller segments. So for the regions, you have New England, Mid-Atlantic, the South, the Midwest, the Great Plains, and the West Coast. And you can see how each one of those has its own separate number. So any state in the South will start with 976 point, and then the rest of the number for the state. The Midwest has 977, and so 977.8 is for Missouri. And the Great Plains, that's where Kansas is, it would be 978.1 for the state of Kansas. So you can see how that is broken down. Each state is then within its own region. And you may notice that it goes from New England to the Mid-Atlantic, to the South, and then it juts over to the Midwest, then up to the Great Plains, and over to the West Coast. It kind of has this line kind of going around the United States. It does the same thing inside each state. So you're going to have Sedgwick is next to Sumner, which is next to Cowley. That's not in alphabetical order. It is geographically situated. And that's how Dewey does that. And so he was estimating that in 1876, whenever he designed this, that we were going to have more states after that. So he put the earliest numbers on the East Coast and in the South, and as they went over, they added more states onto those numbers. The same way whenever counties split and divided and got broken into new counties, you're going to have different numbers for those counties, and they're kind of regionally associated with each other. So South Central Kansas, you can see we have Barber is 978.182. Then 183 is Reno, 1843 is Kingman, 1845 is Harper, Harvey, 185, Sedgwick. We have so many for Sedgwick, which has Wichita in it, that they've actually broken it up and put another number on the end of the Sedgwick County number to stand for Wichita. So anytime you have a large city within a county, they will sometimes do that. They do that for Wichita. And so you can see what the numbers are and how they kind of go, what's going to be next to each other on the shelf. And so all of this is in your handout, and I have handouts back there. It's a 4-page handout, which, double-sided, so it's 2 stapled together. So all that information, all these Dewey numbers, everything that I'm giving examples for is all in there. The only thing that's not in there is that large name of that book. I didn't put that in there. That was kind of crazy. Don't name your book like that. I mean, that's just crazy. So we also have the Kansas Reference Collection. That's besides the genealogy collection, we have the Kansas Reference Collection. And these are non-genealogy books, but the people use them for putting context where their family live. We also have college students and other people who are coming in to do research on Kansas or on Wichita or on the Great Plains. So it's all sorts of topics such as Western expansion. We have stuff on railroads and cowboys and Indians. We have stuff on plants and animals. So if you're interested in what different types of plants grew well or they might have had here at the time. So somebody talked about a snake and they described it. You could possibly identify it from our snake books that we have. We have stuff on government. We have stuff on Native Americans. It has its own call number for that, which I'll get to after a while. And it also has stuff on the natural environment, such as water rights and natural forest fires and Great Plains fires and burning things like that. So it's all sorts of different topics that your people may have had experience with, or it gives a more full picture of what their life was like. We also, in 2019, were given the Kansas State Daughters of the American Revolution Library. They had their library out of Dodge City, and over the years it wasn't as used as much, so they came and offered it. Actually, she was the one who came to us and said, "Hey, would you like to have our library?" And I said, "Yes, I would love to have that." And so we were estimating it was going to be around 5,000, 5,500. Instead, it came out once we started cataloging, it was over 6,000. So that's quite a few items. So of those 4,600, 46,000, of those 46,000 that we have in the genealogy collection, 6,000 are from the DAR collection out at Dodge City. And so each one of those books is in the library catalog. And it actually has a book plate on the inside, and I'll show you what it looks like. And so it says, donated in 2019 by the Kansas Daughters of the American Revolution. And it also has, if they had an original book plate in there, whenever they, as a DAR library, they may have put a book plate in there for the donor. We kept those in there, so you can see who donated it to them. And we did not shelve these together. So everybody comes in and says, "We want to see the DAR collection." Well, that's the whole room, because basically it's 1 out of 8 books. And so they're wherever they're supposed to be. So the Virginia books are with the Virginia items. The Massachusetts books are with the Massachusetts items. But if you open up the book, you're going to see the book plate, and you can see that's who it was donated by. And it's also marked in the library catalog. So if you look up the title, you'll see this little flag over there that says "Donated in 2019 by KSDAR." And so this is what the book plate looks like that we stuck in each one of those. When you open it up, you'll see it. It's kind of blob, but it's nice big letters, so it's easy to read. And here's what it looks like whenever you see it next to one of the original ones. And so this was a book that was originally donated in 1979 to the Kansas Daughters of the American Revolution Library, and then we got it in 2019. We also have quite a few books on the military. So kind of going from the DAR collection to our military collection. We have different things such as our rosters. We have unit histories and battle histories. We really try to develop getting names of soldiers because, you know, Kansas was the soldier state. We had lots of people after the Civil War come here to Kansas for the land and the opportunities that were out here. So I really tried to develop our military collection that we have, especially when we had the anniversary of the American Civil War. I really tried to beef up stuff then. So anything on the American Revolution is going to be under 973.3. The War of 1812 is under 973.5. And the American Civil War is under 973.7. You kind of notice, you know, it's kind of going chronological, and the numbers go increasing in space. And that's how they arrange the military records there. And we have quite a few records for the American Civil War. We have over 2,000 volumes there. We have a lot of the great big sets that you would see in research collections that I went through and purchased about 10 years ago. And so we do have the War of the Rebellion, which is online, but it's really hard to use online. But we have all the books there, and we also have the supplement, which is not available online. And so those are records that people, the officers wrote saying, this is my unit and this is what we did, and they would send it back. They may write about what happened in a battle. They may write about what kind of food they got or how terrible the cotton blankets were and whatever, and they write these back. So they may not mention your person specifically. It's not going to mention the private's name or anything like that, but it will give you an idea of what was going on in their unit at the time and what life was like and what they were doing. And so it gives you a good background information. We also have a pretty good collection for Europe, and I've been buying things for Scotland, Ireland, for England, for Germany, and for Eastern Europe. The Scotland and Ireland, I just got done with a 4-hour class on Irish records up there at Mid-Continent Public Library. They had it up there on Thursday. And so it was a really good class on the different types of records that they have. And I realized you really can't cover that in books. And so it's mainly on how-tos. And like we have the Irish Famine Immigrant book, which lists people that came over during the Irish Famine, and those type of things. It's really, you're going to have to use the online resources. You'd look at the church records and land records that they have online. So I don't feel so bad at having just a few hundred items for Ireland, because really the best resources are the online ones. Linda was also at that conference. As far as Germany, that's where we have lots of immigrants here from Germany, and I've bought quite a few books, and I will go over what some of the titles are. I've put them in your syllabus, can't think of the word. Put them in your syllabus, and some of the different things that I have for Germany are the Germans to America, the Map Guide to German Parish Registers, and the German Immigrants to American Church Records. That last one is a recent project that the Latter-day Saints have been doing. It's Brigham Young students have been doing. They're actually going to the church records of German churches and transcribing all those names and putting them in books. So they've done Ohio and Missouri and other states like that. So you can go through and see if your person is listed, and you can see which church they were in, and you can find more information about them then from the original records. And as far as the Germans, I have over 400 volumes for that. And for England, I have the Doomsday Book. So if you're looking for really old stuff and you've gone back far away, I do have the Doomsday Book set. And for Ireland, I have the Famine Immigrants. For Eastern Europe, I have the Migration from the Russian Empire. And I also have the Jewish Yitzhak books. Anybody have Jewish background? No? Some? Okay, yes. The Yitzhak books are basically what they call the memorial books. So during World War II, they would go and wipe out an entire town, and they wouldn't have anybody living there anymore, and they would have lost all the resources, that, all the photos and whatever. So they started contacting people around the world saying, hey, you lived in this town. Can you give us the oral history of what you know? What stores were there? What synagogues were there? What did you do when you were growing up? What photos do you still have? So they then put these together and made these wonderful memorial books about these towns across Eastern Europe. And they're originally in Yiddish, and so they went through and they translated them in English. And so I bought the English version, don't have to worry about reading Yiddish, but they do give information about what that area was like and what life was like growing up in those areas. So if you happen to have somebody from Ukraine or from Poland or from any of those Eastern European countries, I may have a Yitzhak book from either that town or a nearby town that may give you some background information. And so here's some of those Yitzhak books. And luckily they are in English and they've been translated, and the stories inside of some of these are just really heartbreaking, because they'll talk about their family and how many was in their family at the start of the war and what it was like during and after, and how everybody was just kind of dispersed across the world. This is another view, and so you can see all those books I was talking about. We have quite a few there. So these little short shelves up here are all those little topic things that I talked about, the census indexes, the church records, and things like that. These are on the short shelves. All those taller shelves you see across the back, that's the 900s. That's all the books that we have for the various states, and you can see how many volumes that we have just for those states. And on this one row closest to the right, going down underneath the exit sign, that's just Kansas, and Kansas goes around along that back wall also. So I have quite a few items there that you can come up there and take a look at and spend hours going through things. Other things that we have up there that may help you, we have a digital microfilm scanner reader. And so if we have something there on microfilm, such as the local newspapers, we have the Wichita Eagle and the Beacon, we have a bunch of other smaller papers for Wichita up there. We also can get microfilm in through interlibrary loan from the Kansas State Historical Society. They recently just started that up again. They had stopped due to COVID, but they now are taking rentals again. So if you have a Wichita Public Library card, you can ask for one of those rolls of microfilm to be delivered to our library. You can then take it and go over to the digital scanner, put your little thumb drive in there, and pull up the images from the microfilm and save it as a JPEG or a PDF on your thumb drive. Also, if you have your own microfilm that you have at home, or if you have a aperture card or a microfiche, any of those flat ones, we can do any of that. So if you have it at home and you want to digitize it, you can bring it in and do that. We actually have had some companies that have brought their own records in, because they might have gone through and microfilmed their own. We had several banks have come through, so they might have microfilmed the bank records, and they're like, well, we don't have a machine that could read that anymore. So they'll come here and then sit there, they usually have an intern, sit there for hours and save everything. And so it's useful. And it can also do your color slides. So let's say you have your grandfather's vacation slides from the 1970s and 1980s, that he has all these nice vacation slides of your family going around the area, and you can come in and you can digitize those also, and you could scan them at a very high resolution in color and save them. In our storage area, those are the things that are marked in the catalog where it says items are in special collections storage. So if it says that, you have to come up to the desk and say, hey, we want this item. You give us the call number and the title. We go back and get it. And we come back out and we want to hold something hostage. So we'll either hold your library card or your driver's license. We hold on to that while you have our book. Then whenever you bring it, you're done with it, you bring it back and we give your card back. And these are mainly items that were published prior to 1910. They're either in bad condition, like they have brittle pages, or they have a loose cover, or they have loose pages. We also have our duplicates back there. So let's say something that came from the Kansas Daughters of the American Revolution library. We took everything. We didn't turn anything down. So if we already had a copy of that, we put theirs out on the open shelf, so people could see the book plate that they donated it, and then we took our copy and moved it to the back, because usually our copy was in worse condition. So therefore we moved our duplicates to the back. We also have other one-of-a-kind items, like all of our photographs are back there. We have over 10,000 photographs. And we are in a current project where we are now digitizing all of those. And so we are digitizing the front and the back of all of our photographs, and we're going to be placing those up online. We also have a postcard collection. We have around 5,000 postcards. We have around 1,000 maps. We have a couple manuscript collections. We don't really have a whole lot of those because we have sort of an unofficial agreement with the Wichita Sedgwick County Historical Museum, where they gather three-dimensional items, like tables and chairs and paintings. We, as the library, gather published materials, like any book that has been published, we'll take that. So anything that's kind of a manuscript collection, such as diaries or letters or loose papers like that, we usually send them up to Wichita State. Now, they don't accept everything because they really are kind of narrowed down on what their topics are, depending on what they want to gather. So sometimes the people will come back to us and say, hey, would you want to take these? And so we have gotten there was a secretarial group out of Wichita for early secretaries in the 40s and 50s. We got their papers. We got the papers for the Links organization, which is there in Wichita, has been around for over 50 years. We just got the lady who started Riverfest, we got her papers, and we just got those last year. And so it's a lot of the early history on how they started Riverfest and how they organized it and planned it. So you never know what you can find up there in our manuscript collections, which are one of a kind. That's why they're going to be in the back. They're not going to be on the open shelf. And so anything that's really valuable, like our Sedgwick County plat maps, and we have some aerial maps where they would fly over the whole county at around 300 foot and take photographs of everything. So if you have a farm that you want to know what was on your farm in Sedgwick County, we probably have a photograph from either 1938, 1950, or 1960. And so you can see what that farm had on it and what it looked like and what kind of outbuildings. Now, it's not going to tell you what the building really looked like because it's so far up and it's taken directly down, but you can see that there was a building there or that there was a barn there. It's also good if you want to see what the layout of the land looked like before it was really changed. We also have access to databases, and that's where a lot of people now come up here for access to our databases. We pay for American Ancestors, but it's only for the main branch. So if you try to go to our sub-branches, Rockwell, Westlake, and like that, they don't have access to American Ancestors. You have to come to the main branch, which is the Advanced Learning Library. And so if you have New England ancestors, if you have anybody that's in Massachusetts or New York or anything like that, you definitely want to look at American Ancestors, that database. The other database that we have a lot of people use is Ancestry Library Edition. Now, with COVID, until about a year ago, you can have access to that database from home, but they stopped that. They now went back to the way it was, where you have to come into the library building and use our computers to have access to the Ancestry Library Edition. But it's a really good database to get started with. If you have Ancestry at home, your Ancestry database is way better than what we have at the library. Because the one at the library has around 9,000 different databases inside of that. And when a database is like the 1940 census, the 1920 census, the 1930 census, Missouri marriages, each one of those is a database. So we have around 9,000 of those for the library version. But if you have it at home, you have over 35,000. So that's a whole lot more if you have the online one at home. But if you're just getting started and you want to get your framework of your family history, this is still a good place to start, and it's free. It will save you a lot of money, because if anybody has a subscription to Ancestry, it just keeps on going up. You'll notice that. We also have something, I'm sure that a lot of you will like this, that you can access the Wichita Eagle from home for free. So you don't have to have your paper subscription anymore. We have something called Newsbank, and it has the Wichita Eagle on there. It actually has the full images from each of the pages, and that goes back from 2018 to now. So you can actually view the current paper there. And that has keyword search, so you can look at the different articles, you can do searches and whatever. And that's under the Wichita Eagle, under Newsbank, and is for use within the Wichita Public Library card. And you can do that from home. So you can access that from home and save yourself a lot of money. The other thing is, who has a Kansas State Library card? Some people. You need to get that. It's free of charge. You can get a Kansas State Library card from your local public library, and that will give you access to different databases free from home. And those databases include Heritage Quest, which has the census on it. It has city directories on there. It has other things that would be very helpful for you doing your background, starting up with your family history. It also has Fold 3, so if you're wanting to do any family history military research, it has Fold 3 on there. And so that's something you can get from any public library. Just ask for that and they can sign you up with that. And then finally, we have the digital archives. That is something where we have been wanting to do for a long, long time. I got there in August of 2002, and I was gung-ho with wanting to get things online. And we did the Wichita Photo Archive, which was 1,000 images that we put online with the Wichita Sedgwick County Historical Museum and with the Department of Special Collections at Wichita State University. We put 1,000 images up online back in 2002. But we really hadn't done anything since then. Well, I have a new supervisor who's gung-ho too, and so she wrote a nice grant, and we've gotten some nice projects started here. And we now have software where we can post things online. So off the library website, if you go to the library website, then go to under Research, Local History, and Digital Archives. And that's where we're placing everything. And we've just started this back in October, so it's just baby steps right now. But we have put up the USS Wichita, their cruise book. That's one of our most popular ones and items that people were asking for. We also did a project with the COVID interviews. We interviewed almost 50 people there in Wichita, asking them what life was like and how it affected either them or their families or their business. And so we have taped those, we transcribed them, and we put them up online. So you can actually read or listen to those stories of different people, what went through with COVID. And we have a funeral home director on there. We have the person who was in charge of the health department and how they made their decisions on how they were going to do testing. We have a school board member. We have several school principals on there to talk about how it affected the kids in their schools. And so it kind of gives a snapshot on what people were thinking and what they had to go through to work with this. And I had one lady whose daughter had passed from COVID, and she had gotten her daughter's death certificate that Saturday, and her interview was on that Monday. And I was the first person she really talked with after getting the death certificate. And these were very emotional interviews that these people had. And I had another one who was, he was 24 and he realized he was an alcoholic while he was going through COVID. And so he dried out and he hadn't had a drink for 1 year and 3 months at that point. And so he talked about how he did that and how I asked him what he thought about that liquor stores were considered essential. And he says, well, if you didn't have them open during COVID, it would have been a lot worse because then the people who had to have it couldn't have had access to it. And so it was very, some of those were pretty tough interviews. We also have, we're going through the DAR items that were given to us. There's a lot of them that were created by local DAR groups in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. They're little tiny, they're almost like they're in paper binders, like you had in the paper school binders, and it may be transcriptions of this cemetery or a listing of these soldiers that are buried in our county and things like that. So we're going through those and we're digitizing those. So in case, hopefully nothing ever happens if we have a fire or a tornado or anything and it's lost, we still have it digital. So we're going to go through and digitize the ones that we can digitize, and then we're going to ask permission to put those online because some are in the public domain, some are not. So we're going to have to get permission to put those up online. But therefore people can have access to those, and we also still have a digital copy in case something happens. We have also gone through, and on one of our grants, we digitized the city ordinances and building codes for Wichita. And you're probably thinking, well, why would you want to do that? Well, the building codes from 1917 was one of my most popular requests because if you remember, about 7 or 8 years ago, we had a wall collapse in one of our schools. And that was a school that was built using the building code from 1917. And so we had lawyers and people on both sides wanting to look at that book over and over again. And I was like, this is going to tear the book apart because that was the one and only copy. So we digitized that and have it online so anybody can now look at it there. We also have the city ordinances for those times, and so if you're looking to see what kind of laws they had for integration of schools or anything like that, you may see something in there. We also have, we digitized 5,000 images, front and back, so it's over 10,000 to do that. And we're going to be loading those this year, and we have several of them up already, several hundred up. And Rosie was the one. We had 450 that were portraits. And so I pulled those listing of those portraits, people like J.R. Meade or other town founders. And I said, hey, Rosie, you're a genealogist. We're going to use you and your expertise to write little stories about each one. So, why are they important to Wichita? Why do we have their photo here? And so whenever we get those up, hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have those descriptions that she has written. And so you can then read a little bit and learn more about Wichita history. And then there's the link, wichitaphotos.org, to the 1,000 that we did with the Wichita State University and with the Wichita Sedgwick County Historical Museum. And so do you have any questions? Yes? How far do your yearbooks go back? She wants to know how far our yearbooks go back. They really start in the middle teens, like 1910, 1915, that time frame. So it's a Wichita, well, they just called it Wichita High School because there wasn't another one. So it's just Wichita High School. We have it around 1910, 1915, somewhere through, I don't know the exact year. But we didn't have a second school until 1933. That was North. And so once North came along, we then called the first school Wichita High School East. They don't go back that far. They're more recent, and so they're maybe the 1930s or 1940s for that time frame. I do have, it's like 2 here, 3 here, 2 there. So it's whatever somebody had in their house and they didn't want anymore, and they brought them into us. And so we're accepting them like that. So I have a few from Goddard, a few from Valley Center, and a few of the towns around, but I'll take any of those. And I even have a few from Oklahoma. And the ones for colleges, I have a little bit more widespread because you have more mobility with the colleges. Yes? As far as Sumner County postcards, she wants to know if we have any of those. I don't know. I do know we have lots for Wichita and Sedgwick County. We just got when I say just, over Christmas, we were mailed 2 boxes from Austria. This lady from Austria contacted me and said her grandfather grew up in Wichita. He grew up there, collected postcards, and somehow his son ended up in Austria with the military, and then she has them now. She has no interest in them. She has never, well, she came here and visited us last summer. She asked if we wanted them. And I said, yes, we would be glad to have those, because a lot of them have writing on the back. And I said, those are the best ones. The ones that have, this is what we did in Wichita, this is what we saw in Wichita. That's great. And so over Christmas, she mailed me 2 boxes of those, and I just had a volunteer go through and split those, Wichita, Kansas, and others. I don't know if we have any Sumner. I would have to go and look. Any other questions?
Is this still valid?
That is the card, and it does expire after 3 years. So if you renewed it more than 3 years ago, it would be expired. So we could go in there under admin, we could go in there and check it and see if it's still valid, and if it's not, we can get you a new one. Yeah. I don't know the password off the top of my head, so I can't do it now, but I can do it when I get back to work. Yes? We have 1871 to 2018. So 1871 is when they started, and 2018 is when the company stopped microfilming it. That was about the time when it started getting hard to get microfilm anywhere. And so the company that was doing it for us, and had been doing it for a lot of different newspapers across the country, said, well, we're going to be doing it through the end of 2019. We have enough microfilm to do it. Then it didn't turn out that way. So we were given 30 days notice that they said they were going to be done at the end of 2018 with the microfilm. So I do not have any 2019, 2020, 2021, and so on in microfilm, which is a shame. But I'm unable to, I can't keep the paper copies because that would fill up this room and it would be a fire hazard and it would be really hard to try to research anything that way. So we have made a contract with Newsbank, and we have access that way. So they have a digital copy of the paper from 2018 to now. And so we pay a pretty good chunk of change to be able to do that, and so that people still have access to the local paper. And if you notice, they're a lot smaller than what they used to be, and it doesn't have as good of local coverage as what they used to have in the past. And it's no longer the gossip paper like you had whenever you could read in the 20s and 30s, where it would say who visited whom and what little scandal was going on, and they used to put that in the paper, and you would find all sorts of interesting stories about your ancestors and what they did in their lives, and it's just not in the paper anymore like that. And so everything I talked about is in the syllabus. I also put down different titles for those different call numbers. And so go through there, like if you're interested in the German or the Irish or whatever, or the military, and I have those listed there so you can see what some of the larger sets that we have. So I went through and put the larger sets down, but we have dozens and dozens of other books that are just individual titles that I can't list all of those. But everything's in the catalog, so just go to our library catalog, and obviously you can search by title. But most people don't know the titles of books, but you can also search by keyword or by subject. And keyword will pull it up anywhere in the description, and subject is just by the subject heading. But it's very useful to use our library catalog. Any other questions? 2018, the end of 2018. We also have the Wichita Beacon, which was 1870 up through, gosh, when did they get bought out? It's around 1970. I can't remember if it was the late 60s or early 70s, but we also have the Beacon. And as far as the Eagle, we have both the Morning Eagle and the Evening Eagle. So the Beacon was the evening paper that would come out, after work time, and the Morning Eagle was the one that you read in the morning. So if you're going to be looking for obituaries, always look for the Morning Eagle, because that's going to have your most information. Whenever they microfilmed the Beacon, it's not the best quality whenever they microfilmed it, so you can read the headlines and you can read the titles of the articles, but the actual articles themselves, you have a 50-50 shot of being able to read it because they didn't microfilm it the best. So I'll always tell people, go to the Morning Eagle first. And the Wichita Geological Society and Rosie just got done doing the obituary indexes from 1921 to 1954. So we have the obituary indexed for all of those years on the Wichita Geological Society webpage. 1955 through current is on the Midwest Historical and Geological Society webpage. So they started theirs in 55 and went forward. We then went backwards. And we had the harder job of the two because in 55, the reason they picked that date is because that's when they started putting all the obituaries on one page. And it's usually on 2B, so I make the joke that obituaries on 2B are not 2B. And but 1954 and before, they could be anywhere. It could be on the society page, on the sports page, on anywhere that they had space, they will shove an obituary. So these volunteers had to go through each page of the paper and look for those obituaries, which was years of work for them to do it. The other thing is, there is a separate database called newspapers.com Publishers Extra. So newspapers.com has the Wichita Eagle up to where it goes out of copyright, which is in public domain rather. It has it up through where the public domain starts, which is 1923. So newspapers.com has the Eagle and Beacon up through the beginning of 23. Then after that, if you want 23 through now, it's on newspapers.com. That's a special Publishers Extra. So you have to pay for the special extra money to do that, but you can then do keyword searching for the Eagle and the Beacon and pull up that full article and see it right there. And we're hoping at some point that they will move it from the Publishers Extra over to the regular newspapers.com, because right now Publishers Extra is only available as a private citizen. A library cannot have access to it. So I have my own personal subscription, and so I can, I have that for searching, and it is very useful. But hopefully at some point they'll move it over to the regular, and then we can then subscribe to it and have access to anybody for the Eagle and Beacon, which would be a godsend for doing local history research. Because I use that database all the time. Any other questions? No? Okay.